training, 4 classes next week and one Monday. And so I have 5 classes. So those 5 classes we will take up time sensitive networks and design of control networks, control application networks using time sensitive networks. Okay. Are you being able to see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have been talking about hypercube networks. We saw how an hypercube network can be recursively built. Um, an n-dimensional hypercube network, and how can it be built from 2 h(n-1) to n-1 dimensional hypercube networks. We also saw how we number the nodes in the hypercube so that it aids in routing as well. And finally, we also saw how routing can be conducted in a simple hypercube network. So up to this, we studied. Any questions up to this? Yes. So if there are no questions, I will proceed on to how we also studied how fault tolerance is implemented in hypercubes. In particular, we studied 2 mechanisms of implementing fault tolerance. And then we were looking at how do we do routing in injured hypercubes, where injured hypercubes mean some nodes and links can fail. So we saw that the hypercube network was a different kind of network from the 2 other networks that we studied, the multi-stage interconnection network and the crossbar network, in that these are not networks which take as input and take some messages from input computer, say, to some output devices. We do not have any separate switches. It has a regular structure. The hypercube has a regular structure, as we saw how we recursively build it. And they are built out of computing nodes themselves. So the computing nodes are both the processing entities, which act as source and destination of messages, and are also forwarding entities, as against in the other 2 types of networks where we had switches which were purely forwarding entities and they did not do any processing. Okay. And now we are seeing how we can do routing in injured hypercubes. Before that, we already saw that in a hypercube network, it is a fault tolerant network. So between any source and destination, we could have multiple paths. So because we could have multiple paths, this also gives us the opportunity to devise dynamic algorithms for routing in a hypercube, which so we already saw simple routing in a dynamic routing in a hypercube. What do we mean by dynamic routing in a hypercube? Given a source, how do we slowly proceed from the source through the intermediate nodes to the destination? And therefore, we devise a strategy as to how to proceed to the next intermediate destination, and then going to that next intermediate destination, how do we proceed further? So these 2 things we saw in the basic routing strategy. We saw that the hypercube network is fault tolerant. So now we will see what happens when when some nodes and links can fail in the hypercube network. How do we take messages or packets from the source to the destination? Okay. The essential philosophy. So these are the 2 routing strategies that we are studying in this, and because we are studying fault tolerant computing in this part of the course, so this is the first type of fault tolerant routing strategy, and this is the only fault tolerant routing strategy that we will study. We don't have time for more, rather. Okay. So essentially, philosophically, the strategy is a depth first search in a graph. If you know how depth first search occurs, you can just imitate that in your mind as we will be doing depth first search. Okay. So the routing algorithm must be modified when we have faulty nodes or link. And the basic idea is that we list the dimensions along which the packet must traverse and go one by one. Okay, even if we do not go to this slide, let us go to the next slide. This is slide number 11. Now we will go from source to destination. At any intermediate node, let us say a message has come to me. So there are two possibilities. Either that message is is directed towards me, I am the destination. If not, I have to forward it. Now we will see such a message when it comes to a particular node. What are the steps does it take? Okay. So when a node V receives the message, we first check if V is the intended destination. So we first check if V is the intended destination. If so, it accepts the message, fine. Otherwise, we have to check if the message can be forwarded one hop closer to its destination. If possible, forward along the chosen link. So how do we do that? We know how to do that, right? Because if we are in a particular node, I know the binary number of that node, I know the binary number of the destination, and our established strategy is that we will do an XOR of the number of this node with the destination number node. Doing the XOR, bitwise XOR, we will get the dimensions in the bits which are 1 in the output of the XOR. Those dimensions we have to traverse, because in those dimensions the source and destination bits differ, and hence if we traverse through those dimensions, we know that we will reach the goal. So then the strategy is to have a, like we studied previously, is to have a way to proceed either from most significant to least significant, or from least significant to most significant. Between, let us say we follow from least significant to most significant, we go about that, and then we find out which is the first bit in this relative address meaning the XOR output, where you will have a 1, and then we take that dimension and move one dimension closer. So this is what this third point here is telling. Otherwise, check if the message can be forwarded one hop closer to the destination. If possible, forward along the chosen link and exit. Because why exit? Why we have these exits? Because see, we are running this algorithm for node V. This algorithm, when it proceeds to the next node, again this algorithm will be run for the next node. So we are checking for node V here. Okay. Now, what happens if we cannot do this? If we cannot do this, that means what has happened? What has happened is that the link or the node that we are considering here, let us say that is faulty. Either the next node or the immediate link leading to the next node is faulty. So one point I missed here, I will add. That is why I stopped a bit. So here I have another point. So the point is this, that I have found, so if my current node is V and my destination is D, I have done this XOR of V and D, and this one is D. Let us say D, and then this D is what? Essentially, it has a bit string, right? So it has a say suppose dn minus 1 dot 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 d0, like this, right? And we said that we will find out, and let us say this is 0, let us say 1 1 0 1 0, and we are traversing from the least significant to the most significant. Then what has happened? We saw that the first one, that this bit position 1, in bit position 1 I have a 1 in this relative address. So what do I try to do? I try to take a dimension 1 link and go to a neighboring node. This is what is my strategy. Now I am seeing that this node is the next node is faulty, or the link leading to it is faulty. Then first what I do, I go on proceeding left and find out which one is the next one. So the next one is here. This is the next one, and I try to send it along this dimension, because I know these ones, the ones in D, these ones in the relative address, wherever are the ones, if I take any of these ones, I will try to go one hop closer. So actually this point incorporates these 2 points what I am telling. If I am trying to get the first one where this in the relative address where it is 1, if I take that, I go to that next address. This is according to whatever is my rules were in non-fault tolerant routing. Now the point is that in the first one I could not, because the link or node was failure. So I find the next one going in the same direction from the least significant to the most significant, the next one in this relative address. So then if I can take any one of these ones, so I take the next one, and I see that the next one is also faulty. When I take the next one, I see that this link is also faulty, or the leading node is faulty. So I cannot take that one. I again proceed to the left. So I go from least significant to more significant. So I test all the ones in this relative address from the least significant to the most significant. If I can take any one of these nodes, if I can take any one of these bits, that means any one of these dimensions, and get a fault-free link and a leading fault-free node, then I take that link and go to the next hop. I am done. Go to the next node. I am done. However, in this whole relative address, if all the bits are all the 1 bits that are there, I cannot take any one of these links because all of them are faulty. Then what do? I come to this step. Then I take a detour. I am not saying that I am taking a detour until if I can take any one of these ones in the relative address and proceed, then I am saying I am not taking a detour. I am saying that I am taking a detour only if all the ones in the relative address are, I cannot take any one of these ones because all the links corresponding to these ones are faulty, or the leading nodes are faulty. Now the question is, how do we take a detour? Now again I proceed from the left to right, and now I try to find any link. Those are zeros. Those dimensions I don't need to take, but I'm taking a detour. So I'm trying to get some link. If I'm trying to get some link from this node V, which is fault free, and proceed to that. So if not, we take a detour. We try to send the message through a link that this message has not yet traversed from V. So I only take into account. So suppose this is a node. I have many links emanating out of this node or coming to this node. One of these links is that one from which I have already come to V. I have come to V from somewhere, right? From the source, taking some link. Barring that link, I will try to find another link which is fault free. Because if I take that, go back to where I came from. So barring that link, I will try to find out some link which is fault free. Okay. Now, if I can find such a link, I will go to that node and my algorithm ends there. If I cannot find any such link, that means all links from this node other than the one through which I came to this node are all faulty. All the nodes or the corresponding all the links or the corresponding nodes that these links lead to are any one of them are faulty. So I cannot use any of these links. So my only option then is to backtrack. So if none of the links are working from node V, then I backtrack from where I came. Okay. So if the message has traversed every such link in node V, we need to backtrack and send the message back to the node from which V originally received it. And then again I exit. So I backtrack and then exit. Why? Because I backtrack, then I go to that node, and then essentially what has happened? Essentially what do? I do the same algorithm. Going back to the node, I run the same algorithm that I am running for V. Now, after backtracking, if it so happens that I have come to the source node itself, then it means that the hypercube is disconnected and there is no path from the source to destination. And I stop. Is the algorithm clear to you? You may ask questions. I'll take an example, but at this point, is it okay with you? Hello? Are you listening to me?
Yes, sir, it's clear, and it will be more clear with an example, as you said.
Okay. But the example does not cover all cases. I'll not go to the detailed algorithm. I don't have time. But the algorithm is this. Whatever I told. It's a depth first search algorithm essentially in a graph. So I go from the source to destination. At any intermediate node, I try to take any of the dimensions which so essentially the philosophy of the algorithm is this. From the source I have come to a node. First, what I try to do, I try to take any of the dimensions which takes me one hop closer to the destination. Mark my words. I try to take any of the links in this node which takes me one hop closer to the destination. If I do not find any link in this node which is working and which takes me one hop closer to the destination, I try to take any one of the other links in this node which are working. If none of the nodes are, if none of the links are working, then I backtrack and run the same thing. If my backtracking takes me back to the source node and I have no other option, then I have a disconnected system, and essentially I cannot go from the source to destination because I have a disconnected graph. This is it. So now we have a system here, we have a network here where one of the nodes in particular 010 sorry 011, which is faulty, and I'm saying that I have a faulty node 011 and I want to go from 000 to 111. So what do I do? At 000 the destination is 111 and my relative difference is therefore 111. D111 means not destination, sorry, the relative address is 111 because I want to go to 111. So my relative address is 111. Now first I take a dimension 0 link and I go to 001. At 001 I try to take a dimension 1 link, but if I try to take a dimension 1 link, I will go to 011 and this 011 is not there. This 011 is faulty. So I cannot take the link from 001 to 011. This link I cannot take. So when I cannot take this link, what do? I told I will take the dimension 1 link. So I will take the dimension 1 link and go to 101. Okay. When I go to 101 and then this edge 101 is available, so I go to 101 and then I go to 111 by taking the here again I go so my D the difference vector or the relative address will be what? Will be 0, 1, 0. So I will take the dimension 1 link and go to 1, 1, 1. Now the question is, if both of these, let us say both of these are not working. If 101 is also faulty, what do? We still know what to do. What do? I see if there is another link which is working. So I find from 001, we find that there is no other link other than the link from which it came from is working, because both the second dimensional link and the first dimensional link I cannot take. So then I backtrack to 000. Now at 000, I will try to take another link. I will not take the 0 dimension. I will take the 1 dimension link. So if I take the 1 dimensional link, I will go to 0, 0, 1, 0. If I take the 1 dimensional link from 000, I will go to 0, 1, 0. So now if I go to 0, 1, 0, I will again generate the relative address at 0, 0, 1, 0. So what is the relative address? The relative address is 101. So if the relative address is 101, I will first try the first dimension, the 0 dimension link. So if I take the 0 dimension link, it will try to go to 011. Now 011 is faulty, so it cannot take the 0 dimension link. What is the other dimension link that is available? The second dimension link, because my relative vector is 101. My relative vector is 101. So I will take this 101 and I will go to 110. Right? If you do not understand, please tell me. Then when I go to 110, I again take the difference. I again take the XOR. So when I take the XOR 110 XOR 111, I get 001. So I take the 0 dimension link and go to 111. Is it okay with you?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Now, because it's a depth first search philosophically, I may ask you at any point in time, even in the exam, you may need to prove, let us say, you can prove that if the graph is not disconnected, this routing strategy is always find a way to move from the source to the destination. Right? A proof by contradiction may be possible here. You can try to do it once as the last assignment, as a bonus assignment, that if the graph is not disconnected, if there is a way to move from the source to destination, this routing algorithm will always find a way to do that. Okay, so I'm proceeding. So next we move to another type of network called point-to-point ad hoc networks. So these are point-to-point ad hoc networks. So many a times when we join nodes, like in a computer network that we have around us in a LAN, they do not have a specific structure. We join nodes and we form a network. Let us say in an automotive car network, we have nodes which are connected through links. You could possibly have switches in between as well in an ad hoc network. In this case, we have shown only computing nodes, but you could, in an ad hoc network that we have, you could have switches or nodes. Nodes can be processing nodes, which would do processing as well as forwarding. You could also have switches which will only do forwarding. So the network need not have a regular structure. So often more than one path may be there between two nodes. For example, if we say, let us say we want to find to go from N1 to N4. So we have paths, say we can take this path from X, so X12 and X24. We can take this path X13 and X34, and we can also take, say, let us say the third path X12, X23, and then X34. Okay. So in such ad hoc network, there is oftentimes multiple paths from a given source to destination. These are complicated in terms of finding out their reliability, resilience, etc. So in such networks, we are often interested in finding terminal reliability, also called path reliability. So what is this? What is the probability that there exists some operational path between two specific nodes, given probabilities of link failures and possibly node failures? Here we will consider link failures in the same way as we did before, by incorporating node failures in the outgoing links, say, of the nodes. Okay. So then one important point here is that not all paths are disjoint. So finding this probability is not so straightforward. So then let us try to determine a generic way of determining the reliability of such terminal reliability between source destination pairs. How do we calculate terminal reliability? Okay. So let us consider for this simple example, this specific example first, and then we go for a generalization. So as we said, there are three specific paths from N1 to N4, P1, P2, and P3. These are the three paths. Now let Pij denote the probability that Xij is operational. And similarly, Qij is the probability. So small p, these are small p, and capital P is path name. So small pij is the probability that Xij is operational. Similarly, Qij is the probability that link Xij is faulty. We assume nodes are fault free. If not, their probability is incorporated onto outgoing links. Fine. Now, how do we determine probabilities here? So in some way or the other, we try to modify these events that I am taking path 1 or path 2 or path 3, these events into some disjoint events. So set of paths must be modified to an equivalent set of mutually exclusive events. Now, otherwise, some events will be counted more than once. Now, how do we do that? For example, for this source destination pair, my mutually exclusive events could be that P1 is up. So if P1 is up, I send it through P1. This is the strategy I follow. I always send through P1 if P1 is up. I use P2 if P1 is down. And I use P3 if P1 and P2 are both down. So then if I use this strategy, then I can get these mutually exclusive events. P1 is up, P2 is up, and P1 is down, and P3 is up when both P1 and P2 is down. Then if we, using this strategy, this strategy of using P1 first and then using P2 if P1 is down, when P1 is down, and using P3 when both P1 and P2 is down. If you're following this strategy, then we can add up their probability to find the terminal probability between N1 and N4. And how do we get that? What is the probability P1? The probability P1 is is the probability that both x12 and x24 are working. So P1 will be working if both x12 and x24 are working, which is P12 into P24. Now, otherwise we said, what is the probability that P2 will be working and P1 is not working? So this thing is firstly not very difficult here, because P1, P2 will be working when P1 is not working. So now this is easy. Why? Because P1 and P2 are disjoint. There are no links, no common links between P1 and P2. So the middle term here, you see, the first part of this middle term gives me P2 is working. So P2 is working, that means x13 and x34 must be both working. So the probability is P13 into P34 multiplied by what? At the same time, P1 should not be working because they are disjoint. I can simply multiply. So multiplied by 1 minus P12 into P24. This I can do because these two are disjoint. The third one, however, what is it saying? It is saying that what is the probability that I will be using P3 when P1 and P2 are both down. So now, what is the probability that P3 will be working when P1 and P2 are both down? So P3 has links, you see, x12, x23 and x34. P1 has links x12 and x24. So if P3 has to work when P1 is down, then it must be the case that x24 in that case is not working, because P3 won't be working if x12 is down. So P3 is working means x12 must be working, and P1 is not working in that case would mean that x24 must be down. Similarly, what is P3 working and P2 is down would mean that the link x13 must be down, right? So if this is so, then what is the probability that P3 is working while P1 and P2 are not working? That is P12 into P23 into P34, which is P3, multiplied by the case Q13 into Q24, which are the probabilities that both are down. Okay. Now, doing this is not so easy for more complicated networks. We have to go and see each link, what are the common links, and then find out. So we need a more generalized method. But before that, this discussion, is it clear to you? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sir, we can
Yes.
directly write as 1 minus Q1, Q2, Q3.
1 minus
Q1, Q2, Q3. If
what
all
is Q1?
path 1 fails.
Path 1 fails. So path 1, no. See, point is path 1, path 2, part 1 and part 3, or part 2 and part 3. These two cases are not disjoint because we have common links that created the problem. Understood?
Okay, sir.
So we are trying to find P3 is up and both P1 and P2 are down. So how can we have that? That is what we discussed. So we discussed that if P3 has to be up when P1 is down, that can only happen in the case when X24 is faulty, link X24 is faulty. Similarly, we said that P3 is up when P2 is down. That can only happen in the case when X13, link X13 is not working. Because if the other link of P1 and P2 are not working, then P3 will also automatically fail. Right?
Yes, sir.
Is it? It should be clear. Okay. So now let us try to find a generalization of what we just said. So let us say we have m paths from a source ns to nd. And the m paths are named p1, p2 dot dot up to pm. These are the m paths. Let ei be the event denoting that pi path pi is operational. So and ei bar is the event denoting the case when path pi is faulty. So reliability from ns to nd is the probability that any one of
Sir, are you there? We can't hear you.
Does anyone have Sir's contact number? Maybe you can ask, call him and ask.
Hello, are you being able to listen to me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hello, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, yes. It got broken for how much time?
From 5:40 around.
So around 10 minutes. Oh my
Yes,
God.
sir.
Okay. So up to where were we when you lost connection? Did you see all these slides? Slide number 19, was it completed?
Sir, can you open the slides
Oh,
and
I'm not shared now. Okay, okay. Sorry, sir. I forgot to share. Just a minute. Just a minute. These online classes, extremely painful. Are you being able to see the screen now? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, did you see slide number 19? Slide number 19, was it completed? No. Can
So
you see slide number
so
19?
it wasn't completed
In
as
between it was
Complete.
we were discussing.
Okay. So we said we said how we determine the disjoint probabilities, the disjoint events. So we said that these events E1, E2 intersection. So I am in this line. I am back to this line. I am back to this line. If you are seeing the arrow that I've just drawn. So the events E1 union, this event E2 intersection E1 bar, E3 intersection E1 bar intersection E2 bar. All these events are now disjoint events. So these unions can be converted to pluses. So I can write these as this as the first thing that we pointed is this. We can write this as probability of E1 plus probability of E2 intersection E1 bar plus probability of EM intersection E1 bar intersection E2 bar likewise. So that was the first thing. Now we converted into these plus signs, making them disjoint. After that, we will use the property of joint, this conditional probability, to find out, to simplify one step further. So we will be able to write probability of, let us say, E2 intersection E1 bar as probability of E2 multiplied by probability of E1 bar given E2. So what is E1 bar given E2? Probability of E1 bar given E2 says that the probability that that path 1 is not working given that path 2 is working. Okay. Similarly, for the mth term, we will have probability of E1 bar intersection E2 bar intersection EM bar given EM. So what does that mean? The probability that path 1, path 2, dot dot up to path m minus 1 are not working. Any of them are not working. All of them are not working. Given that the probability that all of them are not working, given that path M is working. Okay, so this is the strategy that we followed. After this, what did we do? We defined a new term. E bar Ji. E bar Ji. So what is E bar Ji? We said that E bar Ji denotes this: the probability that path Pj is faulty given that Pi is operational. This thing we wrote as Pji bar. So now if when we use this term, then we can convert that any of these terms. So any term in the previous expression, if we see in the previous expression, in the last expression of this previous slide, this expression here, I'm in slide number 18 again. This expression here, RNSND, this expression, you take any term. So what will be the ith term? The ith term will have probability EI multiplied by probability of E1 bar intersection E2 bar intersection dot 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 up to EI minus 1 bar given EI. That is the ith term of this this expression. We are seeing how we can write the ith term in a better way. So this ith term can be written as, sorry, this ith term, my God, this ith term can be written as, so this is the ith term. This ith term can be written as, so what is the probability that path P1 and path P2 and path P3 and path Pi minus 1 is not working given that path I is working? It is equal to the probability that path P1 is not working given Pi is working and path P2 is not working given Pi is working into path P3 is working given that Pi is not working into dot 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 path Pi minus 1 is not working given Pi is working, right? This it can be written to. So now when we can write in this way, we identify the links that must fail for EJI. That is this one is a capital I, it is I. We identify the links that must fail for EJ bar I to occur. So now how do we do that? So what are we trying to find out? What is EJI? So I'm trying to find out the conditional set that Pj is not working given that Pi is not working. So in the first strategy, in the first slide, in the smaller graph, how did we find out? We tried to find out, because we have now got just two paths. So we are now free to do this, that what are the links in path that are there in path J that are not there in path I. So for Pj to be not working when Pi is not working, the links that are in path J but are not in path I, any one of those links must be faulty. Again, I am trying to find out the probability that path J is faulty given that path I is working. Now path J is composed of a set of links, path I is composed of a set of links. Some of these links are common. Those common links cannot fail, because if any of those links fail, then Pi will also be not working. So we are trying to find which of the links that are there in path J but not in path I. Then we have to find out any one of those links which are in path J but not in path I, any one of those links, if they fail, any one, if they fail, then I will get my case. What is my case? Pj should not be working and Pi should be working. Okay, is this clear? Is this clear? Yes, no. Are you again out? Are you being able to hear? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, then let us stop here. I will again start this discussion. Okay, before I go, I have given a homework on interstitial mesh. I will not teach interstitial mesh, but I will just give you a in one minute. I will just tell you this part. I will tell next day. But interstitial mesh, what it is, I will tell so that you can do the homework. So interstitial mesh comes from rectangular mesh. What is a rectangular mesh? Rectangular mesh is nothing but this one, this interstitial mesh. If you do not have these middle boxes, leave out these middle boxes and the links. So you have a rectangular mesh of nodes. These middle boxes are essentially redundant nodes. So interstitial mesh means in a rectangular mesh. So if you do not have these boxes in between, the boxes in the middle and the links, if you do not have, this example is a 4x6 rectangular mesh. Okay, this is a 4x6 rectangular mesh. Now this becomes an interstitial mesh when you have a structure like this. When you have redundant nodes in the middle somewhere. Now this one in particular is called a 1x4 1,4 interstitial mesh. Why? Because in every cluster of 4 nodes you have one spare node. Every cluster of 4 nodes you have a spare node. Every cluster of 4 nodes you have a spare node. That is why it's called 1x4 interstitial mesh. It becomes a 4x4 interstitial mesh, for example, if you have a box within every other. So if you have something like this, every box contains a in between, then it will become a 4x4 interstitial mesh. Here we have a 1x4 interstitial mesh. So a spare node, the spare node can be switched in to take place of any of its neighbors that has failed. The redundancy overhead is 25% because for every 4 nodes you have a spare node. So the homework is, what is the reliability of an interstitial mesh? How do you find that? You first find out the reliability of each cluster, then multiply that by the number of clusters. So given any rectangular mesh, you have to first find out how many clusters do you have. You will get the number of clusters through a mathematical formula. Given that mathematical formula, you can determine the reliability of the cluster using your previous strategy. What is the reliability of this one? Any one of these nodes can fail. If any one of these nodes in a cluster fail, then this cluster will still be working. So you know how to find out the probability, reliability of a system of 5 nodes when any one of them can fail. Right? If any one of them fails, under one component failure, it will work. So you know how to calculate that. So you know how to find out the reliability of a cluster, and you know how many clusters. So given that, you should be able to determine the reliability of the mesh itself, of the interstitial mesh itself. So this is the homework and over today's class. So next Monday, we will complete our discussion on our ad hoc network, and we will then proceed to time sensitive networks quickly. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Welcome. Sorry for
Thank you,
the
sir.
interruption, but it's out of my hand. You all understand.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.